Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Hung Loy. She's had quite the career working in supply chain, manufacturing, and product development. With such a diverse work history, I was really interested to learn more about her journey, especially the ways in which communication has benefited her. So often as technical professionals, it's easy to assume that being technically proficient is all we need to focus on, but many of us eventually realize that that's not the case. So let's jump into talking to Hung. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Hung.
Well, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me to this discussion.
You got it. So from the research I did on you, I saw that you studied chemical engineering. So what was the motivation to do that?
Well, it's pretty easy. I was good in math and science, and at that time, I think I was just a few years into the country, having emigrated here from Vietnam, and my family were not college educated, and my parents were not technical. And so, the conventional thing with a lot of Asian families who were emigrated into the U.S., and we were actually refugees at the time too. You pick something that's safe and marketable. Doctors, engineers, we have no idea what engineers do, but being good in those areas in the school, I said, well, let's give it a try. I like chemistry and I like math, and I heard that engineering requires some skill set in that area. And at the same time, I wanted to do something difficult and challenging. So I was always driven by doing something that few other people could do, and mostly because it's a challenge, but also it's a responsibility in a way. As that, in school I was always a good student, so I should pick something that people think is challenging, and do something that perhaps I am, I guess, equipped to do because of my talent. So I can't be waiting for anybody else to do this. I should be doing picking a field that I thought was, demanding of my skill set and my talent. So let's go.
Okay, that's an interesting reason. And I typically ask that question to people because I'm always curious to see how people came to their field of study. Whenever I'm asked that question, I tell the truth now, but for the longest while I used to lie because I was embarrassed by the reason. But the reason I studied engineering is because my father said I should. I had no when I finished college, when I finished high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in school. So I just thought, well, my father said do engineering, and I said, all right, engineering it is. And luckily it worked out okay. So yeah, I'm not too upset by it. And it sounds like it worked out for you as well.
Was it now? Was he an engineer or technical background as well?
Nope.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and mine weren't either. So nowadays I think a lot of parents tend to steer their students. Or I don't think a lot, but being marketable with your skill set through college is an important reason too. And I happen to have found a career that I also like once I got into it. So that's a bonus, because doing this because it's marketable is only the first step, but finding something that you really enjoy doing is really where things become rewarding.
So what kind of work did you do once you finished school?
Well, I joined a large company, 3M, a Dow 30 company in Minnesota. I came out of Ohio, had never been pretty much west of Chicago, didn't know where Minnesota was, really didn't know anybody from Minnesota. And I actually ended up staying with 3M for my entire career. I worked there for over 34 years before I stepped away and decided to dedicate my time to doing things that I want, which is giving back to the community, STEM advocacy, and gender equity, yeah, and even that word or that term that you hear that is not well received these days, making sure that the workplace is diverse, it's equitable, and it's inclusive of everyone. So that's what I do now. Having the opportunity to step away. But I worked for over 30 years at 3M being a product development engineer. I take things that are made in a couple of square inches as prototypes And then the journey it takes to actually produce it into the miles. At 3M, we make a lot of things like a lot of tape, like Scotch tape and many continuous things. So taking it from a couple of square inch prototype all the way, all the science that's involved in taking it into the manufacturing process that produces by the miles was what I was involved in. So I was involved with commercialization of new products. I led many of the product development teams. And so I worked with chemists, with engineers. I'm usually the technical engineers that leads up the manufacturing development process. I also work with marketers and business people to make sure that thing gets all the way through the end, making sure that our manufacturing cost is low enough so that we can afford to price it at a price that makes us money, but also deliver value to the customers at a price that they want to pay. And then, of course, getting the product produced in such a way that it gets to the customers in the volume that they want on time with the supply chain issues and all the intellectual properties that is involved in that whole process. Because when you're a manufacturing product, you also have to make sure that you have the right to practice all over the world and where we manufacture the products.
When you were leading product, well, I guess before you started leading product development teams, what's one thing that you didn't anticipate having to do being a leader of a product development team that you eventually learned that you did have to do?
I think maybe part of your talk here is about public speaking, but I certainly did not know how much public speaking that I still have to do after, or will have to do all throughout college. You kind of do a little bit of that when you're presenting your project, but when you get into the workplace, and I really didn't know what engineers did in a real workplace. I mean, outside of some internship, you're finding yourself that there's some people that think that engineering is perhaps mislabeled as a geeky kind of profession, and that you may not be needing to have social skills. Far from the truth. You do have to have communication skill. Maybe, some people call that social skill, but you have to communicate. You have to verbally communicate, and you have to communicate well in writing, practicing your grammars and, professional writing and thinking on your feet. Those are all very, very important. And I had to lead projects really pretty much from the very beginning of my career. I was in this rotational program, and at that time, leading project was considered by some not to be so much the glorified position of power, but really you call the meeting, you take the notes, you invite everybody, you keep everybody updated. So it's actually a very communicative skills that I said, okay, I got to do all the technical work. I got to schedule all the experiments and figure all the technical stuff out, but I got to make sure that the team stay connected. So publishing all the minutes, writing all the minutes, and all of that administrative work was also part of the deal. And so you got to be, somebody who people trust. That people rally to, and you have to make sure that you're on top of all the different things that have to be accomplished in order to deliver the final product to the end goal, which is the customers who pays.
When you were talking, Hung, it reminded me of a previous guest that I had on the podcast. And this was back when she worked in the tech industry. She now is a founder of a company, but back when she was working in tech as a developer, she worked with another developer, and she sat not too far from this person. So she could actually see him from her desk, but you couldn't go talk to him whenever you wanted to talk to him. He had a cube on his desk. And when the cube was green, you could talk to him. But when the cube was red, you had to leave him alone. Just remember, so when you were talking about the importance of having those social skills, it just reminded me of some of these people in the tech industries that don't seem to have them at all. So good for you for having them, for sure.
and that goes with the territory. It's the emotional quotients that we all gain. Some of us may be clumsy at first because we didn't know we had to do that or even how to do that correctly, but you do kind of pick up cues from your coworkers. Some people like to communicate with email. Some people can only do it in person because that's what they prefer. Some people like to be quick to the point and leave them alone. Some people like to, work me up to the conversation and convince me what you're talking about. So you kind of have to learn that there are different personalities that you got to work with out there. And you also learn about yourself, which is one of the most important tools, knowing how you prefer to work. I'm one of those people who, when there's a deadline, I would like to have people to come in. Don't be repetitive. Tell me what you wanted me to know, and let me tell you what but don't be repetitive, because be quick, be gone, be bright. I'm not usually that cold, but I learned to have my own cues too. So I would actually tell people that in one of these personality discussions that many of our teams go through, whether you're red, green, blue, or yellow, and I was all bright red. So I said, don't let that scare you away. I'm all bright red, but my flip side is green, which is affable. So I can be affable when I want to be, but a lot of time I will, if I have to get the team focused, I will exhibit that red personality of being the director or the general marshal. And knowing that about myself and letting my coworkers know, it's a huge, important start because that allows you to communicate with one another and not put other people off because you exhibit this style. And then you also are not being put off by other people because they don't seem to be participating. Well, they're not you.
You're 100%
so invite
right.
them to participate.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I'm glad that you have the foresight to know that just because you like to be communicated a certain way doesn't mean other people like it, and vice versa. So
it's not foresight, it is hindsight. It is years of practice and learning by trial and error and by mistakes.
Indeed. Okay, that's wonderful. When you were working at the organization you worked in, and you mentioned product development, but did you ever move around within the organization? Or I'm assuming that you weren't doing the same thing the entire 30 plus years you were there. And so, so based on that, like, how did you make decisions as to whether you moved into something different or not?
Now, my company makes 50,000 products. It's a big conglomerate of many different technology. While I chose to geographically stay in one place with families and children to raise, I moved from job to job. I was working at first in security ID. So one of my first job out of school was to make more secure counterfeit resistance ID. So we were playing with driver's license to try to make fake IDs. So it was a cool job trying to make something like that. And then I moved into, I worked at that, and then also some safety product. It was the same group that used the same technology to make reflective products that you see on running shoes and on some of the products that are out in the market that construction work zone vest that reflects at night. So both of those are really cool technology. And then I thought, well, I work at 3M. This is a company that makes tape, Scotch tape and duct tape and medical tape, whatever tape there is. So I really can't say that I work at 3M unless I work with some sort of sticky stuff. So then I moved into a group. I just basically interviewed for a job, and there was an opening, so I interviewed for it, and I ended up at a group that make Post-it notes. So Post-it notes, poster flags. So I did that for about a few years, and completely different technology, different people. It's like moving to a different company, even though it's across campus, because the technology was so different. And then after that, I decided, I kind of missed the optical technology stuff. So the previous job was very much about optics and building products based on the physical and the physics of it. So I moved to a group that produced electronic films that recycles light. So it goes into LCD displays. So you see it in your TV, your phones, your smartphones. It recycles light so that the battery can last longer. And so I did that for probably the balance of the last half of my career. And then after that, for the last few years, I actually moved into even within the same industry, but on the adhesive side of things. So we got to have optically clear adhesive to hold all the electronic parts together, the phones and the tablets. And that was completely technology stripped. So I ended up actually learning new technology on a dime about 4 or 5 times over the course of my career in major shifts. And within the technology, there were many different things within it too.
Nice. it's great that even though that you were with that one organization that for that many years, you had the opportunity to move around within the organization and not just stay stagnant doing the same thing. Because I suspect when people hear, being at one place for that long, it might get boring. But it sounds like you definitely were not bored the entire time you were there. So that's excellent to hear.
No.
So, Hung, I also noticed that you are, or at least you're affiliated with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research as a Global Diplomacy Fellow. So I'm really curious, what does that organization do, and what does a Global Diplomacy Fellow do?
Well, I got involved with that organization through my association with other colleagues at the Society of Women Engineers. And I applied for a fellowship, I think the fall of 22, just about the time that I was about to step away from my company after 30 some years. I was looking for ways to continue to give back to the community. So I was already involved with a couple of organizations out there that advocates for STEM, for women. But I also was thinking a little bit larger, and through that organization, there was a colleague of mine through the Society of Women Engineers who's a faculty member with the United Nations. And the United Nations has a separate training arm called UNITAR, which is United Nations Training Institute. And they have a program that was formed probably 3 or 4 years. It's a burgeoning new program called Global Diplomacy. And the gist of it is they need more people to be involved in global diplomacy, especially people who are underrepresented typically. So you can apply the thought process that women, especially technical women, are not involved as much in global diplomacy. So I spent the semester working with several of my colleagues who were part of the fellowship program, and the classes were taught by diplomats, ambassadors, former ambassadors who are now residing in the U.S. at the United Nations. Actually, some of them do not reside in the U.S. They're still in their home country. So it was a really cool opportunity to learn how the United Nations is formed, and all the different kind of work that they're doing, all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that was set out back in 2015 and should be finishing up in 2030, but many of the goals for ending global hungers and making progress for right up to clean water, clean energy, and for women, for gender parity, those are still, we're probably not going to make it, but we're making slow progress toward those things. But so once you're a fellow, I only spent one semester with them, but I enjoy having a connections of many fellows from that class, as well as many others before and after my class. And we continue to talk every once in a while, like on a quarterly basis, and hope to collaborate on things to make the world a better place. It's a group that is very global thinking, so I have connection with people who are all over the world from that experience, and there's always ways that we can do more to help the world be a better place.
Nice. I think a lot of times, Hung, when people think about those with technical backgrounds, I think you mentioned it earlier, they think about those geeks, but being technical can be way more versatile than I think a lot of people realize. You wouldn't think that someone with your background, having worked at that organization for over 30 years in a technical type role, would then go on to do something like what you did with Unitar, but why not? Especially since, we have one life to live, and why not just go down any path that we find interesting? So kudos to you for doing that.
Well, it's interesting. I actually delivered a talk about this with my colleagues at the Society of Engineer Conference last year, talking about exactly this. You don't realize that many technical people are all involved in policy and global diplomacy and diplomacy development at the global stage, as well as the national stage, as well as the state level. So when you're talking about clean water in cities, in municipality, and in states, many states and many agencies, from whether it's the WHO on healthcare, or the EPA, or the National Weather Service, or the FDA, many of these national agencies hire engineers and scientists. They have to, because they don't work in a vacuum. So you don't think about it, but policymakers do not make their decision or make their assessment without scientists working by their side. So there are job opportunities in many of these agencies, even though the current administration right now is cutting a lot of those jobs. They have been there for a really long time and increasingly so. And of course, the United Nations is one of those agencies that hire many, many scientists and engineers.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier that one of the things that you didn't recognize or realize, anticipate before you started working as doing the work you did leading product development teams is the amount of communicating that you'd have to do. Is communicating with others something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Practice and making sure that we have the time. You know, one of the things that I learned, especially in the last 10 years or so, as I got involved in communicating and delivering talks and speaking at Society of Women Engineers and different conferences, even on topics that I don't have a lot of expertise in, but it's an opportunity to share your discussions at work. When I was working, I was talking mostly about things that I have expertise in, but you're finding out that you're delivering the message. Among your own colleagues in a small group or a team, that's pretty easy. But when you're asking for a budget, delivering an update on your project's timeline and the progress, and maybe you're asking for more capital, for more funding, you have to convince some people of some things that is worthwhile. So what I found out is that to get engaged with to get the goal of your talk or your public speaking at any level, you kind of have to connect with your audience. And the thing that I found out, there's a lot of different things I learned. So practice and finding out that you didn't get the funding or the message that you wanted or the priority that you want to, if you're successful, that means that you connected with the right audience in the right way. So what I found out with some of these discussions is you first have, you can be more successful if you get to the chase. You tell them your message through some sort of stories that helps your audience connect with your message. What is in it for them if they're a decision maker? Why do they care that your project is successful and gets more funding, and why it matters to them? And then you want to make sure that once you understand what you're trying to deliver, which is a win-win for you and them, you are, what I find out is also thinking about your audience first. First and foremost, who is your audience, and what are the 3 or 4 things, maybe just 3 things that you want your audience to walk away from your discussion, your 15 minutes of a presentation learning. And if you can craft that message around those 3 things that you want your audience to take away from, and then the next thing was, I said, I found out I could write a little abstract around those 3 ideas. And if I can articulate that in some shorter thing, if somebody is asking me, oh, you're doing a talk on or a presentation about this project, tell me what it's about. I'm thinking about attending. You might have, 30 seconds to tell them what it is that you're going to be talking about. So having crafted abstract really allows you to actually articulate that to somebody, perhaps in an elevator. And then after that, when you come back to your desk, you've got months and months and maybe years of work that you can have to boil down to some amount of time for your audience, your executive that's going to be in charge of the funding, or your coworkers whom you're recruiting to be on board. So this is a time to make sure that you know exactly how much time you have. Do you have 15 minutes? Do you have 5 minutes? Do you have half an hour? So make sure that you cover those 3 or 4 things that you want to deliver in that amount of time. And then making sure that you also understand who your audience is. Do they have a lot of familiarity with your topic, or the executives so far removed that just need to get an idea of what the decision that they need to make? Or are they other technologists that you're hoping to bounce some ideas off of? So just being mindful of your setting, your audience, your amount of time, that will help you kind of walk through your presentation so that if that's what you're communicating, you are able to make that that speech, that presentation is really impactful and efficient.
Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation, Hung? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Oh my gosh. You know, I would say that up until about 10 years ago, I get so incredibly nervous. My husband had been involved with Toastmasters, and there's been other Toastmasters around campus. I think nowadays, if I were going back to work and I want to do it revolving Toastmaster, I might have the courage to do it now. But for a long time, I said, no, I can't do Toastmasters. I'll talk to my team, but I don't really want to do this. But going out, just going out of my comfort zone in the last several years of speaking in a variety of settings, as well as speaking on topics I have to research in and didn't necessarily start out as an expert in. So it wasn't just about my project, really gave me skills to realize that it was clumsy at first, and I get better and I get more confident. So practice makes perfect. I get so nervous all the time doing these things, but I think it does get a lot better.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation, Hung. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
I'm active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I think there's only one Hung Loi. I think it's just Hang and Loi is my last name. I don't remember if there was a dash in there, but I think there's only one me.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Hung.
Thanks very much for having me.